345 Yada Yahowah, Miqra'ey. Invitations? 5. Pesach, Passover. The fulfillment. Dowd's 22nd Mizmowr, Psalm provides the most vivid and validated eyewitness account of Pesach's fulfillment during the 14th of Abyb in the Yowbel year of 4000 year, Friday, April 4, 33 CE. This story of Passover is regaled by the Zarahwah, sacrificial lamb, himself, as it was scribed in first person. This graphic portrayal of Passover is especially poignant knowing that David provided his people with the exact time of his arrival in Jerusalem 6 centuries earlier, when they were still captives in Babylon. And now he is writing about what he would endure throughout Pesach and Matsah 1000 years before he would suffer such things. Just as Dowd is the only individual who would be presented as Yahweh's chosen one, his most set apart, his firstborn son, his Messiah, and king, he is unique in that he would live 3 lives. In the first, he would write about the next 2, serving as the only man who would fulfill his own prophecies. Most everyone knows something of Dowd's first life, either that he slew Goliath or that he served as king of Israel. It's hardly a secret that he composed most of the Psalms, but very few acknowledge that he also wrote the Proverbs. Surprisingly few recognize that Dowd was also a prophet, the Messiah, and the Son of God, even though Yahweh is abundantly clear about these and other accolades. 346 While there are hundreds of very specific prophecies pertaining to Dowd's return with Yahweh on Kippurim in year 6000 to serve as king, fewer than 1 in 1,000 accept this as true. Jews are awaiting a nameless Messiah and Christians replaced the actual Messiah with an elaborate ruse such that they are expecting the second coming of someone who has never existed, and that is relatively good news. Fewer than 1 in a million are aware that Dowd fulfilled the first 4 modim, Pesach, Matsah, Bikurim, and Shabat, during his second of 3 lives. We hope that with this review of the 22nd Mizmowr, combined with our presentation of 2 Samuel 7, Psalm 89, Isaiah 9 and 53, we can correct this grave injustice. As we begin, the dedication of the 22nd Mizmowr includes a unique variation of a common word, el, which was written elth. And since oath would create the plural of el, my assessment, based upon what we have recently discovered, is that Dowd intends for us to consider how each definition of el applies to him during the fulfillment of Pesach. To the glorious director and everlasting guide, Nazak, concerning the approach of the brilliant conductor and preeminent orchestrator who is enduring and magnificent, according to the leadership of the lamb opening the doorway, vigorously protecting the flock, LTH, the plural of El, ram, a male lamb, the leader who governs the door jam or doorposts, a buck or stag, and one who is sufficiently strong, healthy, and vigorous to serve the sheep, of the dawn, Yasha'yah, of the sunrise at daybreak. A song, Mizmowr, a psalm with lyrics set to a melody, of, Dowd, the beloved. Mizmowr, lyrics of a song, Psalm 22 dedication. It is marvelously befitting what follows. Dowd would 347 represent all of these things on this day and those that would follow. The Lamb of God who opened Passover's door prophetically revealed that he would say, My God, Eli, why, lama, for what reason, for how long, and to what end, have you in this moment forsaken me, Azab have you, even for this finite time, abandoned and relinquished me, have you left me during this period and are now separated from me, having departed from me, releasing me and thus damning and deserting me, perfect second person masculine singular. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:1 in part. Dowd was among the most prolific prophets. He had volunteered for this mission. He knew why. This question was rendered for our benefit. Azab speaks of separation, of abandonment and damnation. So, when the distancing is from God, we know that Dowd's Nepesh was en route to Shaul. Chag Matsah is one unified event played out over 7 days, the first of which is Pesach. Profoundly important in this case, Azab was scribed in the Kal stem and perfect conjugation. The separation would be genuine, albeit for a finite period of time. Therefore, Dowd would transition from fulfilling Pesach on Moriah to enduring Matsah in Shaul before coming home to Moriah on Bikurim by the dawn's early light. Since the torture of Passover would end, and the celebration of Bikurim would be just a day away, the period of damnation would be limited in time but not anguish. This distinction is particularly relevant because Dowd's Nepesh had been inseparable from Yahweh in Shamaim for 1000 years prior to this occurring. Keep in mind that while Dowd is relating his own experience, as a first-person narrator, there isn't much he 348 can say about his experience in Shaul during Matsah until it was over. So, he will be taking us in and out of the timeline as he recalls his perceptions as these monumental events played out. Prior to Pesach, Dowd's soul was resident in a nondescript basar, body, one which would soon be discarded. And prior to this moment, he had enjoyed the comfort, encouragement, perfecting nature, enlightenment, and support of the Ruach Qodesh, set-apart spirit, his constant companion during his prior life. Therefore, with her departure, there was a massive void. As for the body he was using, parting with it would be good riddance. It had once been so ordinary, it was never described, and now, it was a gory mess. The Romans had ripped the skin off of his tendons and bones with their whips and now were anguishing it further by nailing it to a crucifixion stake. What was left of his sacrificial body was nearly dead, and having served its purpose, it would soon be incinerated in accordance with the Torah's instructions, never to be seen again. Far, Rachuk, remote in distance and time, separated in space, alienated and no longer in a state of close association, from Rachuk, meaning to be removed and distant, to be sent off and to go far, away from, min, out of and separated from, my liberation and deliverance, Yasha'yah, my rescue and salvation, but especially my freedom, are the words, Dabari, are the spoken and written statements, messages, communication, records, and accounts of my anguished groaning, Shaga'eni, of my roaring moan as a lion. My guttural cries in torment, by alluding to the roar of a lion. Dowd is equating himself to the lion of Yahuwdym. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:1, every verse is one number advanced in the JPS Tanakh to accommodate the long introduction, making this 22:2. 349. The realization that Dowd's soul was just beginning his fulfillment of Chag Matsah is particularly relevant. Pesach is just the first of 3 successive Miqra'ey, and while the most visible, Passover isn't actually the most important step in his or our journey to God, because that occurs on Matsah, when we actually begin heading home. There is a common mistake made by Jews who believe that Passover is the main event, and that Matzah is just something to eat during it. This errant perception is advanced in Ezekiel, where Passover is the only Miqra'ey Satan wants to pervert and then maintain. It is within his autobiographical account that Matzah, rather than a mode, was relegated to an ingredient, thereby defeating God's intent. This is, indeed, the opposite of what Yahowah had to say about how these 3 days would play out during a week-long celebration of life and family. God calls this time Chag Matsah. Accordingly, Passover is the doorway to UnYeasted Bread, leading to Firstborn Children. And, therefore, from Dowd's position during Pesach, the main event still lay before him. When speaking to puzzled Jews about this realization, I ask them, what happened among Israelites during the first observance of Pesach? They will claim liberation, but the answer is, nothing. They ate a lovely dinner and went to bed. They were freed from and left Miriam on Matzah as they passed into the Sinai. And, therefore, while their lives were spared by Pesach when others around them lost theirs, they walked away from religious and political corruption during UnYeasted Bread. And once free, they became the children of Israel as they were symbolically reborn when emerging from the sea on their way to the Promised Land as a family. However, while Yahowah would take the Israelites out of Egypt, he was not about to remove the Egyptian 350 influence from them without their permission, which they never offered. And so, to resolve this problem, Dowd carried Israel's legacy of rebelling against Yahowah with him into Sheol, where his people's collective guilt would remain. Also worth noting, time would slow and all but stop flowing during Matzah within the black hole of Sheol. It may have seemed like an eternity. My God, Elohim Eni, I am appointed to call out and continually proclaim the summons, and to make the invitations known. Kara, I am mentioned and named when reading and reciting the offers to meet and be welcomed. Kal imperfect first person singular, this day, Yamam, during this day, but, Wah, you do not answer, Lo Anna, you do not reply or respond. Kal imperfect, so, Wah, by night, Layla, in the absence of the light in the darkness, there is no relief for me, no expectation of rest or silence. Walad you my Allah Eni, there is no cessation of noise for me, nor the expectation of anything right, from Dama, to cease as a result of being cut off from Yeh. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:2. Dowd is announcing that he came to fulfill the Miqra'ey, invitations to be welcomed by God. He wanted his pronouncement delivered, read and recited, so that his sacrifice would not be in vain. I think Yahowah's original intent with Pesach and Matsah was to deploy his own Nepesh rather than his son's soul. This way, he would have been able to endure the consequence and penalty of our guilt, ransoming us himself. And while he would have prevailed, this approach would have been awkward when it came by Quraim because Yahowah's Nepesh was not his son's. More importantly, had God fulfilled Passover and UnYeasted Bread himself, he would have acted out of character by working alone, and he would have deprived 351 his beloved son the opportunity to earn the respect he needed to guide Israel into the future. As painful as it must have been for a father, Yahowah honored Dowd's desire to serve by not responding prematurely to withdraw him. He would do so, but not until the conclusion of Matsah. The full day and night of separation would not only isolate Dowd's soul, but during this time there could be no communication between father and son. It is interesting to note that there is no noise in space. This is because there is no medium for the waves to promulgate, as does sound through the air. But within the extreme density of a black hole, the noise would be oppressive as the fabric of the material realm is pulverized. It would have been anguishing. When allowing his soul to enter Sheol, Dowd had to implicitly trust Yahweh, and to an extent we can only imagine. No soul had ever been allowed to escape. His would be the first and last. There is even better news, because when Dowd carried his people's guilt with him into Sheol, leaving it there, our souls were unleavened. The pervasive fungus of religion and politics was forever expunged. In this way, the covenant's children are perfected, preparing us for adoption during Bikurim. This is what Matzah enables, and it explains why it is so essential for those who want to live with God. The Hebrew word translated night, Lael, actually defines Sheol as the adversity of being away from light. There would be no rest as his soul descended into the darkness, the one place God himself could not go. Incarcerated in hell, Dowd's soul would suffer, as the body he had occupied was sacrificed during Pesach to open the door to life. 352 Projecting his thoughts toward his father, and recognizing that they were now on opposite sides of the universe, Dowd reminisced. You are set apart, while Otter Qodesh, you are separated and distinct, unique and uncommon, living to establish, Yasha'yah, dwelling throughout time, intent on being the living embodiment and establishing a dwelling place, Kal participle, the renown and reputation, Tehillah, the adoration and excellent character, even the credibility and subsequent empowerment, from Halal, the brilliance of Yisrael, individuals who persist and persevere, engage and endure, with God, freed and empowered by God. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:3. One of the most misunderstood and yet crucial concepts for us to understand, if we are to know Yahweh, is Qodesh, set apart. It reveals that God is not here on earth, nor does he exist in proximity to his creation. It means that he cannot be common, and thus cannot be the God of religion. He is neither omnipresent nor involved in most people's lives. He does not exist within the edifices men have erected for him, nor does he hear human prayers. Qodesh also means that, if we want to live with God, we must distance ourselves from the most popular human institutions and become uncommon and unique. The more we reflect the faith and politics of those around us, the further we stray from the Almighty. Yahweh does not want to be worshipped or obeyed, but, instead, he lives to re-establish the reputation of his people, Israel. That is an amazing insight into his character and purpose. This remains his prime objective. Even before we realized that this was Dowd fulfilling Chag Matsah, this statement was devastating for Christianity, because it means that the Passover Lamb was not enduring this sacrifice on behalf of a Gentile church or Christians. This knew what he was talking about in this 353 regard. In you, Bar Otter, our fathers, Abernaknu, relied, Beitach, they trusted, at least for a while, and they were totally confident and genuinely secure, Kal perfect. They trusted, Beitach, genuinely relied for a time, placing their confidence in, Kal perfect, and, Wah, you continually rescued them, Palathem, you brought them away from danger to a safe place, delivering them, helping them escape and survive, Peel imperfect. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:4. God is consistent. When we rely upon him, he delivers as promised. Unfortunately, it has been a long time since Israel cried out to Yahweh. And yet, on this side of the Exodus and with the Torah before us, the first step home begins by summoning Yahweh by name. This, however, was not an academic exercise for the Messiah. He was going to be imprisoned within the most extreme manifestation of Miqra'ey, the crucibles of religious and political oppression, militant, and conspiratorial subjugation. As the plural, contraction of my, to consider the implications of Zara, being confined and anguished, Yahweh's liberation of the children of Israel enslaved in Miqra'ey serves to foreshadow what God would do for his son. So, in his plea, Dowd is identifying with Israel at the most magnificent moment in their long history. To you, El Otter, to you, they cried out for help, Zark, they called for assistance and they summoned, Kal perfect, and they were delivered, Wa Malat, they were spared, saved, and rescued, Nifil perfect. In you, Bar Otter, with you, they trusted and relied, Beitach, they placed their complete confidence, Kal perfect, and they were not disappointed nor 354 disapprove, while Lo Bosh, they did not suffer emotional or physical distress or despair because they were not considered wrong or mistaken and they were no longer ashamed, Kal perfect. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:5. In light of Beitach, they trusted and relied. It is criminal that pastors and priests preach faith and not reliance, belief and not trust, and then direct the faithful to Jesus Christ rather than to the actual Messiah and Son of God who is speaking. A person's faith is as meaningless as his or her beliefs. The reliability of the object of our trust is all that matters. Yahowah and Dowd. Dowd's declaration goes way back, all the way to the Yatzah, Exodus, and the lesson is twofold. First, Yahowah came with Moses to deliver them from the torment of civilization, from being oppressed and worked to death by an authoritarian religious and political regime, and while their lives were spared on Pesach, they were liberated from the controlling influence of Egypt during Matsah. Unfortunately, their preferential circumstance would be short-lived and, that is made evident by the perfect conjugation. The Israelites had bonded with their captors and took their predilection for false gods with them. In that these are Dowd's thoughts as he was completing his service as the Pesach ale, each word should be understood in the context of Passover. The mode was and remains the doorway through which we can escape the deadly consequence of religious and political corruption. On the other side is the promised land. Passover is the portal to a new life, one that is perfect and eternal. Those allowed to pass through it en route to UnYeasted Bread are never disappointed. While Dowd volunteered, Yahowah allowed for his son's soul to be separated and suffer in our stead. And although we do not fully understand the mechanics of how 355 he was able to carry our guilt with him to deposit it in Sheol, we do not need to know how it happened to appreciate why it occurred, or to benefit from it. And let's be clear, this was tremendously painful. Mizmowr, Psalm 22 will go on to detail the most torturous elements of Dowd's suffering. It was at the end of a long day. He had been through the pretense of a trial, spit upon, beaten, and whipped by Romans. This would be the first time in 1,000 years that Yahowah's spirit would have to back away. That alone would have been traumatic since she had been with Dowd from the time he was 8 years old. But if she intervened to protect him now, she would negate the sacrifice. As a result, his body suffered and bled beyond our comprehension. Inhumanely designed Roman flagella ripped the skin off of his vulnerable back and legs. Then the beast nailed the quivering flesh of what was left of the lamb to a post, to die an excruciating and humiliating death. And therefore, I am but, Anki, with regard to the speaker and this discussion, I now exist as, a crimson grub, tolar, a bloodied worm and scarlet pulp, coccus illici from which red dye is extracted, no longer extant or present as a person, lo ish, no longer a man or individual, i.e., I'm now less than human. Ish is from an unused root meaning extant, rebuked and taunted, insulted and dishonored, chirper, scorned and disgraced as contemptible, defied and railed against, insulted with slurs, by humankind, Adam. Mankind, specifically the descendants of Adam, and disrespected and demeaned, bizarre, disregarded, held in contempt, and ridiculed, seen as worthless, lightly regarded, and of little value, by the family, by the people who are kin, and nation of Israel. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:6. The Roman legions, the very soldiers beating Dowd 356, were known the world over for their bloody red togas and banners. This color, which was designed to invoke fear in the hearts of those they were subjugating, was derived from this tolar, crimson grub. For 1,000 years thereafter, the dye from the coccus illici was valued above precious metals by nobility and clerics as a symbol of power and authority. Also telling, this bud cannot produce offspring without dying. And it voluntarily attaches itself to a tree in order to protect its young, surrendering its freedom to keep its offspring safe. Moreover, like an actual Pesach ale, Passover lamb, the successive generation is nourished by the tolar's body before freely venturing out to explore the world. Amazingly, this crimson grub encapsulates the nature of the Passover sacrifice and its purpose while at the same time identifying those who were abusing the lamb. The first letter of Torah is even illustrative of the timber the Romans used to crucify their victims. God used 3 different words for man in this one sentence. After accurately describing the condition and appearance of his flogged body, he said that he was no longer present as a person. Ish is the term Yahowah used to describe God's form when he visited with Abraham and then later with Jacob as he was renamed Yisrael. Further, Dowd was being accused by Adam, symbolic of the first man created in God's image. This could also suggest that he was assuming some aspect of his guilt, and thus serving as a metaphor for ridding humanity of the evil it had ingested. But more than this, what made Adam unique was his neshama, conscience. And sadly, it is man's inability to think that has caused so many to disregard the Lamb's purpose. Also, means people. A millennium before it actually occurred, the prophet revealed that his offer of 357 redemption would be disrespected by some and rejected by others, seen as worthless by members of his own family, Yahuwdym. Proper consideration of these carefully chosen terms opens a revealing window into the nature, character, and intellect of the Messiah as well as into the collective responses of mankind. Even today, the vast preponderance of people show very little regard for Dowd's gift of life. Not one person in a million acknowledges the association between his suffering and Pesach. Fewer still appreciate the sacrifice Dowd's soul made on our behalf during Matsah. Continuing on this theme, the reference to the Torah, bloodied worm, is both prophetic and telling. The Romans, like the Roman Catholic Church after them, were sadistic in their development and deployment of the most demeaning and excruciating ways to torture and kill. Having been under their control, the body that Dowd's Nipesh still occupied was so abused, it no longer appeared human. This is something God will never forget or forgive. Be assured, he will hold the leadership of Imperial Rome accountable, as well as the Roman Catholic Church, because they would develop and popularize a conspiracy to blame Jews for what they, themselves, had done. Yes, the body of the Zarawa was there to die, but there was no reason to abuse him. All it did was reveal the contrast between God's way and man's approach. And therein is a lesson lost on the preponderance of people. Rome was validating Dowd's prophetic assessment, that it was the most vicious civilization in its dealings with Yahuwdym. They were brutalizing an innocent man. They saw fit to torture the King of Israel, God's son. Not only were they in opposition to Yahowah and Yahuwdym, their animosity toward God and his people would metastasize in the beast which evolved from them, the Roman 358 Catholic Church and Christianity. And this is not a simple lapse in judgment, a momentary refrain from morality. The crucifixion of God's beloved Son became the central plank of the emerging religion. All the Messiah had to do to serve as the Zarawa, sacrificial lamb and fulfill Passover was to surrender his life to ransom his people. Degrading and humiliating, revolting and agonizing torture was Rome's idea, not God's. The Christian logo, that of a tortured God on a stick, commemorates evil, not good. And David endured it to make this distinction between man's approach and God's way. Therefore, due in part to the ghoulish spectacle, the overwhelming preponderance of people not only missed the fulfillment of Passover, they failed to acknowledge the one making the sacrifice. And rather than condemning Rome for being overtly sadistic or excoriating the Roman Catholic Church for inverting reality and blaming Jews, Yahuwdym turned man's most reprehensible act into a religion. As for the lessons we should have learned, Dowd's testimony reveals that this body was disposable. He was sacrificing it to serve as the lamb to save his people. In this light, we should not focus on the nondescript individual, this bludgeoned body, but, instead, on the soul who endured and survived it to tell us his story. But that is not what happened. Dowd's sacrifice was not only dishonored by the empire torturing him, he was also rejected by the people of Israel, his family whose respect he was there to earn. By comparison, their disregard would make the tumult of the waters of Meribah, something which still stains the collective Jewish soul, look like a childish tantrum, and momentary indiscretion. With all of the prophecies pointing to Dowd serving as the Passover lamb at this exact moment in time, there was 359 and remains no excuse for Israel getting this so wrong. And approaching 2,000 years later, they still haven't figured it out. And it's not as if Yahowah didn't try and make this connection for Israel. How is it that God's people have failed to recognize that Dowd was serving as the worm of Jacob and, thus, of Israel? This was foretold by Yasha'yah, Isaiah 300 years after Dowd wrote this Mizmowr. In Isaiah 41:14, we read, "You should never be afraid, you, singular, should not be anxious, Kal imperfect second person feminine singular Jussiv, O worm, Tolah, bloodied grub, feminine singular, of Jacob, Israel, Jacob, serving as a synonym for Yisrael. People, Mathi, men, masculine plural, of Yisrael, Israel Yisrael, I, myself, am here to help and support, any Azar, I, myself, will assist at this time, Kal perfect first person singular, you, Arth, you, feminine singular, and thus addressing the Tolah, prophetically announces, Nam, Yahowah, Yehovah, your kinsman redeemer, Galath, the one from the same family, who pays the price to reacquire those of you who are stained and defiled and ransom you from the control of others. Kal participle, is the set apart one, Qodesh, is the most uniquely qualified, respected, awe-inspiring, uncommon, and special, the essential, dedicated, and upright individual, of Yisrael, individuals who engage and endure with God, Yisrael, Israel. Yasha'yah, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 41:14. Dowd's Mizmowr and Yasha'yah's prophetic portrayals of our salvation are inseparable, as hand in glove, especially when identifying Dowd as the sacrificial lamb and when presenting the set-apart one of Israel as the kinsman redeemer of his people. The Romans executed those they despised along 360 popular roadways, usually naked, because it was more humiliating. Like all despicable totalitarian regimes, the torment was designed to have a deterrent effect, evoking fear among eyewitnesses. More than this, civilizations like Rome serve as grotesque projections of gang mentality, because the larger the empire and more powerful the nation, the worse they behave. This insight explains why Dowd revealed that people were gawking at him, shaking their heads, and saying senseless things, mouths running faster than their brains. All of those who see me, shall ra any, all who gaze at me, who look upon me, they deride and mock me, speaking unintelligibly about me, disparaging me, la any, they speak incoherently about me, stammering disapproving ridicule while scoffing at me. They shoot off their mouths, pataba safa, they open their mouths, flap their lips, and release an unchecked flow of all manner of things, while they shake their heads, nuwa rosh, wavering from the very beginning. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:7. It has been this way from the beginning, and nothing has changed. The world over, everyone speaks unintelligibly about Dowd, the Son of God, and all he represents. It was incredulous for the Romans to mock him. They, and the church they inspired, have always been wrong in this regard. And it's not just that they were and remain ignorant of Yahowah, his Torah, Berith, Miqra'ey, and Ben, it's that they are opposed to them. They continue to be belligerent toward Dowd, unintelligently stammering while slandering and deriding him. To make matters worse, the Roman Catholic Church deliberately negated Dowd's sacrifice by misappropriating his titles, such that he would not be credited for having provided the greatest gift ever offered. It is one thing to 361 have made the sacrifice, but to have the world's most popular religion predicated upon attributing it to a misnomer is particularly egregious. Among the most disrespectful things that have been done and said regarding father and son were perpetrated by the religion led by a pope, father in the worship of a son. They replaced God's name, substituting the Lord. They replaced Pesach, Matsah, and Bikurim with Easter. They replaced Dowd with Jesus Christ. They tortured the Son of God and Messiah and then blamed the Jews for killing their God. And then to commemorate their madness, they revel in these atrocities by turning an object of torture into an object of worship. It's hard to imagine anything more disgusting than a religion that celebrates the appalling abuse of God's Son. Frankly, vomit is more appealing than the Christian cross. Now that we are finally acknowledging that these psalms were written in first person because Dowd suffered through this ordeal, I am convinced that his next pronouncement occurred exactly as it is written. Dowd was immensely proud of his father's name. And it is likely that he used it in conjunction with Yasha'yah, salvation in the pseudonym Yasha'yah to depict what he and Yahowah were accomplishing together. Further, Dowd was so courageous and bold, there is no doubt that he would have told all who would listen what was going to transpire, why it would occur, and who was orchestrating the fulfillment of Chag Matsah behind the scenes. But his audience, like praying zombies, was too self-absorbed to make the connection and too busy talking to listen. These are quotes from those mocking and demeaning the Passover Lamb as he was fulfilling Pesach to open the doorway to life everlasting with Yahowah. You have chosen to be rolled away, removed, and sent away to Yahowah, Galala Yahowah. You wanted 362 to be taken to Yahowah, Cal imperative second person masculine. So, let's see if he wants to rescue him, Palat Hu. Perhaps he will choose to have him escape and survive, rescuing him from this most unfavorable circumstance, with him choosing to deliver him, Peel imperfect Joseph. Let him choose to deliver and save him, Natsal Hu. Maybe he will decide to spare him and defend him, Hyphal imperfect Joseph third person singular masculine. Surely, KY, he desires to be with him, Chafetz Bar Hu, he must want to be by him, he takes pleasure in and has a fondness for him, Cal perfect third person masculine singular. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:8. The implications serve as yet another nail in the coffin of Christianity and Judaism. The lone eyewitness account, the single credible presentation, the only inspired testimonial, of the fulfillment of Pesach, Passover reveals that those who were there had heard the Messiah tell them that he trusted and relied upon Yahowah. He knew that his soul would survive and be delivered from this ordeal, which is why he volunteered to do it. He realized that the purpose of Passover was to tangibly demonstrate Yahowah's desire to rescue and save his children so that they could live within his covenant family. Dowd was simply the foremost among us. To have these things said affirms that Dowd spoke about his relationship with Yahowah. It reveals that he had made these declarations publicly, at least to the extent that those passing by knew what he had conveyed. And yet, there isn't even the slightest hint of Yahowah's name, or how Yahowah intended to deliver the soul of the Pesach in anything Christians or rabbis call scripture, other than what is recorded in Mizmowr, Psalms 22 and 88, and in Yasha'yah, Isaiah 41 and 53. There are no other inspired or credible accounts of Dowd's fulfillment 363 of Passover, UnYeasted Bread, or Firstborn Children. The Christian Gospels are comprised of historically inaccurate, internally contradictory, hearsay, which has been carelessly transmitted and copiously edited. The names and events conveyed within the text are all wrong. The message was agenda driven by universally dishonorable individuals perpetrating deliberate fraud, and the realization that they perpetrated their religious ruse while claiming God's authorization makes the result the equivalent of a neurotoxin for the soul. And while this assessment may seem pejorative, these conclusions are obvious and undeniable. By contrast, Judaism is culpable by its silence. Formed at this time as a rebuttal to the worship of a dead god on a stick under the pretense that he, with a foreign name and title, was the Messiah and Son of God, there is nothing in the Talmud Yerushalmi to counter the deception. There is no mention of Dowd's arrival or sacrifice, of the fulfillment of Chag Matsah, or that hundreds of explicit prophecies were playing out before their eyes. Nothing was more important or obvious, and yet, the supposed sages of Judaism missed it all. Then to add insult to injury, the founding fathers of the emerging rabbinical religion heralded a false Messiah, and even today, they associate with his star. Should there be some confusion on this matter, the Talmud, both the Jerusalem and Babylonian editions, are strictly rabbinical affairs. They record rabbis debating what they want Jews to believe the Torah means, as if they are better communicators than God. And in this regard, they are completely clueless. Given all they had to work with to discern the truth, to call these men sages is to elevate dumb and dumber to Mensa status. That is not to suggest that, even when it is obvious, that learning the truth is effortless or easy. For example, while I had privately discussed the possibility that Dowd 364 served to fulfill Chag Matsah, it wasn't until I understood his motivations that I was able to appreciate why Yahweh allowed him to serve in this heroic and compassionate fashion. And even then, before publicly acknowledging it, I had to test the validity of this conclusion against each of the prophecies pertaining to the fulfillment of Chag Matsah to verify that they were consistent with what we were reading in the 26th through 30th Mizmowr. And that's the relatively easy part, because the real work is in coming to know that what the Torah says about the mode Miqra'ey serves to facilitate the benefits of the covenant while also developing an appreciation for how the Nabi portray their fulfillment in conjunction with Dowd. One must then weave in what we learn in the Mizmowr to develop a complete picture. And along the way, those who come to embrace the truth must be willing to go where few dare tread, because the truth serves to expose and condemn the fundamentals of Judaism and Christianity. Along the way, we also encounter some bumps in our path which must be addressed. One such obstacle is here in Psalm 22:8 with an abrupt change in voice from Dowd serving as a first-person narrator to him relating what he heard being said about himself. Adding complexity, Dowd is addressed directly in the first sentence as you and then indirectly in the next three statements as he or him. Then there is also the challenge of the opening verb, galal, which means to roll away. It sounds awkward to our ears when reading it today, and yet, we need not be concerned since this dialogue is being attributed to those who were taunting the Son of God as he was being tortured by Rome. Uninspired, it is only true in the sense that it accurately conveys what the oblivious individuals stated. Moreover, in the context of the place and time, the terminology isn't as ill-fitting in Hebrew, as it seems in 365 English. This is because galal would have been extrapolated to mean to be removed and, thus, freed. Moreover, in the native tongue, there are additional connotations that may have been intended. It is likely that Dowd would have been crucified before the Golgotha escarpment of Moriah, which derives its name from the same verb. Additionally, galal is used to reveal that the collective guilt of Israel would be rolled away in this fashion, a concept Dowd is likely to have conveyed. As we move on to address the next statement, we are faced with yet another challenge. We have not been told, because we do not need to know, how Yahweh engineered the placement of Dowd's soul in this, now, discarded body. Having studied Yasha'yah, Isaiah 7:14, we realize that the prophecy simply states that a young woman would give birth to a child. Just as Dowd became our Heavenly Father's beloved son when he was enveloped in Yah's maternal spirit, the same is likely true with the body he may have referred to as Yahshua, Yahweh saves. So now returning to the role of first-person narrator, principal actor, and eyewitness, even from the very beginning, we discover how he came to this place. Indeed, it is true by contrast that, you, Otter, speaking to Yahweh, had me to gush forth and thrash about, in normal childbirth from, gyach any men, brought me out through the normal pushing process only to wiggle around and fight through. The primary meaning of gyach is surge, push, or burst forth as part of customary childbirth, making this a graphic depiction of breaking the water in the amniotic sac, causing the uterus to contract, and leading to pushing the baby out during delivery, cal participle. The womb, beaten, the uterus in the abdomen, causing me to rely, betach any, causing me to place my confidence, hyphal participle, upon, my mother's breasts, shadam any, my biological mother's mammary glands. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:9, 22:10 366 JPS Tanakh. By using gyach min, this becomes a graphic depiction of natural childbirth, which is the opposite of a miraculous nativity. It describes the rupturing of the amniotic sac at the commencement of labor, known colloquially as the pregnant mother's water breaking before the newborn child is pushed out of the womb during painful contractions. The mother must contract her womb to deliver her child in less than 24 hours after the gyach occurs for the newborn's safety, and to prevent infection. Similarly, this newborn child was like all others, in that he had to rely upon his biological mother's breast milk to fight infection and survive. This is as ordinary as normal gets. Sorry Twistians with your Christmas pagantry, but it just didn't happen your way. The fact is, scientists do not understand how a new soul is generated during conception. Neither biologists nor physicists have been able to assess the composition of a soul. We know that it exists, that all animals have one, that it has no mass and, thus, must be a form of energy, and that its arrival is the spark of life while its departure is coterminous with death. Therefore, based upon our inability to understand even the most fundamental aspects of an incorporeal nepesh, soul, we should not be surprised that Yahowah didn't try to explain the process involved in facilitating Dowd's second coming. And speaking of the Messiah, as Yahowah's anointed, we were told that he was a handsome man. Further, as Yahowah's firstborn through the fulfillment of Chag Matsah, he will return in God's image and be magnificent to behold on Yom Kippurim. But this time, during the second of 3 appearances, the baby, boy, and man Dowd's nepesh occupied would have been nothing special and literally discardable. Not only does Yasha'yah affirm 367 this in the 53rd chapter, but since this corporeal form would be abused in a macabre fashion, the less desirable the body being sacrificed, the better. Come by Qur'an, he would be beautiful again. Recognizing Dowd's brilliance, I wouldn't be surprised if he intended for us to consider how the metaphors he selected also apply to the Yatzah, Exodus, since he was reenacting an intensely personal manifestation of it. The symbolic message manifested during the portrayal of Chag Matsah at the onset of the Exodus begins with the doorway to liberation and life being opened during Pesach while the firstborn of their religious and political oppressors were dying all around them. The children of Israel walked out of Erez Miraim during Matsah, entering the Sinai wilderness on this day. It was indicative of walking away and disassociating from the caustic and controlling influence of religion and politics, thereby unyeasting their souls of its corrupting nature. Then during Bikurim, they would be reborn in a flood of water, entering their new life, as the sea came crashing down behind them. After receiving the Torah and following a period of attitude adjustment for infantile tantrums, they were headed to the promised land as children who would be nurtured by the milk she would provide. Before you, al-Otter, toward, beside, and in association with you, because of and concerning you, I was cast out of, Shelach min, you were compelled to throw me out, casting me off, forth, down, out, and away from, Hophel perfect, the point of origin as an act of compassion and love, Rechem, the uterus or womb, the child gestating and childbearing organ of the female, a spatial position indicative of the source who is merciful, from Rechem, love, mercy, affection, and compassion. From Min, the womb, beaten, the uterus in the abdomen, of my mother, Ameni, my biological 368 mother, you are, Otter, my God, Eleni. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22 9-10. Shelach isn't a comforting term. It means to throw, cast, hurl, or fling, even to throw away and cast down. This clearly places the soul cast out of heaven and thrown away, temporarily, during Matzah in a tough situation. But that's just the beginning of the harsh implications. The Hophel stem is uncommon because it is inconsistent with free will. It indicates that the subject, Yahowah in this case, was forced, or at the very least, compelled, to part with him for a while, such that Dowd briefly was cast out. Therefore, the arguments in favor of it were compelling. Fortunately, in the perfect conjugation, the compulsion and intensity of being cast off, was short-lived, literally one and done. With the Hophel being applied by Dowd when addressing Yahowah, it speaks volumes about the conclusions that we have drawn. Dowd's arguments on behalf of his soul being allowed to serve in this way were convincing, indeed, undeniable. To earn Israel's respect to the extent required to serve as their eternal king, Dowd wanted this opportunity and wouldn't take no for an answer. A brilliant man made a compelling argument. The concluding thought is also indicative of Dowd's status. Devoid of a verb, it literally reads, "From the womb of my mother you God of mine." So, no matter how we shape the action, it is apparent that Dowd and Yahowah have a history. Upon his return, their father and son relationship was already well developed, having spent the past 1,000 years together. And this time, at least initially, Dowd would enjoy the love of his adoptive family. Should you wonder why Dowd's nepesh couldn't arrive and be inserted into a 30-year-old body and skip past this process, the answer is that to accept the guilt of his people he needed to become familiar with them. Further, even with the failure of Israelites to recognize him, it was 369 important that they be given every opportunity. So, while he was as far from an ordinary Jewish boy as possible, he was born in the normal manner to a typical mother and father whose names we do not know, and then lived among his people. As we move on to the next statement, we find the then future and now past, sacrificial soul pleading with Yahowah, asking him not to abandon him. He recognizes that he is headed to a rendezvous with Satan, the adversary, where he will be afflicted. He knows that nothing exists that can protect him from this ordeal. It is his destiny. And this, too, was necessary. We find that Dowd is now speaking about the means to fulfill UnYeasted Bread. His soul was headed to the place of Rachik, being severed and avoided, removed and separated. He is bemoaning Sheol, the lightless prison, where imperfect spiritual souls endure eternity. Separation from Yahowah is the only appropriate penalty for those who have led others away from God. This means that without the perfecting implications of Matsah, where our souls are unleavened from the fungus of religion and politics, the aforementioned sacrifice on Pesach, where we become immortal, would otherwise be counterproductive. Dowd's soul asks of Yahowah, "Do not continually distance yourself from me by allowing your relationship with me to be severed for a prolonged period, al rachik mineni, do not actually recede from me, avoiding me beyond the needed period, with you sending me so far away from you there is no return, kal imperfect jussive, because, ky, the oppressive confinement and anguish, zara, the troubling oppression of internment, the unavoidable suffering and emotional distress associated with incarceration, and the distressful imprisonment with the adversary, from zara, 370 of being hard-pressed, diminished, bound, cramped, and constrained, vexed and harassed, is imminent, karob, personal, approaching, and near in space-time. And yet, indeed, ky, no one, nothing, can help, azar, can provide support, assistance, or aid, kal participle. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:11. Separation from Yahowah is the appropriate penalty for those who have led others away from God. This means that without the perfecting implications of Matsah, where our souls are unleavened from the fungus of religion and politics, the aforementioned sacrifice on Pesach, where we become immortal, would otherwise be counterproductive. When we transport ourselves into the scene painted by Dowd's words and try to feel what he was experiencing at this moment, it strikes me that he wasn't complaining about the horrific pain associated with his flogging or even the excruciating nature of his crucifixion, but instead was lamenting the anguish attributable with having his relationship with Yahowah severed. It was the imminent and unavoidable distancing from Yahowah in Sheol, the lair of Satan, that would be so hellish. And yet, this is the sacrifice God made on behalf of his people that not one in a million so much as acknowledges. Since Zara serves as the operative verb defining the Israelite subjugation within the religious and political regime of Miqra'ey, it is obvious now that Dowd was presenting his Matsah exodus from Sheol, as an intensely personal reenactment of the Yatsah, exodus of his people. His anguish would come from Zara, being constrained and diminished. He would Zara, surrender his freedom and be incarcerated. Sheol would be Zara, distressing, emotionally anguishing, and painful. And during this time, he would be with the Zara, rival and competitor to God's company, the adversary. Hell would be Zara, vexing, a time of troubling tribulation and oppressive affliction. 371 Satan, the adversary has long been Dowd's rival, the one who saw himself as being in competition with him for human souls. But as a result of what Dowd has done, when he returns Satan will be cast into Sheol and remain. There, he will experience Zara, incarceration, being bound, constrained, and diminished. These are the attributes of Sheol, which is essentially a black hole. Further, Zara is the same word Yahowah has used to depict the time of Jacob's troubles. This then suggests that Dowd will have endured Zara on behalf of his people, Yisrael, thereby earning the right to liberate them from it on Kippurim. Dowd's ordeal on behalf of Yisrael would be karob, imminent, personal, unavoidable, and near. At a place and moment in the space-time of a location and duration certain from the perspective of the participant, bad things were going to occur. He knew it. A hellacious price would be paid to honor Yahowah's Matsah promise to perfect the covenant family. Dowd's foreboding song reveals that, on the cusp of being tormented by Satan, the Romans continued to humiliate him, ripping the flesh from the remnant of his body. And to think that for most, Jews and Christians alike, it was for naught. It's as if Passover and UnYeasted Bread were never fulfilled. Numerous, a great many, fiercely aggressive soldiers, Abyb, fearsome and powerful warriors, even supernatural beings, bullish beasts, frustrated bulls and wild asses, of the aggressively attacking supernatural, Abyb, powerful, fighting, bullish, and spiritual warrior, serpent, Bashan, snake, related to Bashana, shame, a metaphor for Satan, surround me, Sabab Eni, they assemble around and encircle me, turning on me during this time, Cal Perfect. They have besieged and crowned me in hostile 372 fashion, Katha Eni, in a coordinated fashion they gather about to hem me in, threatening me while adorning me with a circular crown. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:12. Abyb was well chosen because it depicts fiercely aggressive soldiers in the first instance when modifying the par, bullish beasts and wild asses, and then describes an aggressively attacking supernatural serpent when paired with Bashan in the second. He would initially feel the sting of Roman warriors and then that of powerful Malach fighting on behalf of Satan, the adversary. Often worshipped as a sun god, Lord Baal was represented by a par, bull, not only because of its strength, but because the sun crosses the constellation of Taurus the bull during Pesach, Passover. For everything Yahowah does, Shah has a counterfeit. Therefore, to redeem his people, Dowd's soul would have to endure the worst tortures that the Roman Empire and Satan, and his full cadre of demons could muster. Either way, these were fierce fighters capable of inflicting painful injuries. Since it is implied in this prophecy, there may be some merit to the story that the King of Kings would be forced to wear a crown of thorns, one comprised of the same intertwined thickets that caught the lamb on Mount Moriah, on behalf of Abraham, Yitzhak, and the covenant. They were witnessing a dress rehearsal for the seminal event of human history. They open, patsa, they part, their mouths, payhem, against me, Aleni, toward, like a fearsome beast, a destroying lion and assassin in search of prey, mangling and tearing me to pieces as a violent and abhorrent way to die, Tarif, plucking off my skin, ripping apart my soft tissues with sharp objects, violently flailing me so as to inflict a repugnant death, while roaring loudly, shag, making an anguishing guttural sound that is thunderous. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:13. 373 They were tearing the body of the Passover Lamb to shreds, ripping the flesh off of his bones and tendons with their whips. And his soul felt the burning sting of every lash. Dowd's anguish on behalf of Israel and the covenant family was no less tortuous than being flayed alive. Second only to crucifixion, it was the most abhorrent way to die. And while Rome inflicted the carnage, not a single Jew lifted a finger to spare their Messiah and King of the needless anguish. A painless death would have sufficed, but not for Romans. Even as a church, they loved torturing, degrading, and humiliating Jews. Long before these sadistic implements of pain were conceived, David wrote of what he would experience. Blood would have dripped from his pen. We know this because Tarif conveys mangling of the flesh by ripping it from the body with sharp objects, providing a poignant, yet accurate, description of the abuse inflicted by 50 lashes by a metal barbed whip, which was Rome's approach to those they perceived as threats to their supremacy. Yet, removing muscle tissue from Dowd's shoulders, back, chest, arms, and legs was insufficient by Roman standards. Our great hero would go on to describe the most horrid form of execution ever conceived by man. 5 centuries before crucifixion with ropes was invented by the Assyrians, and 700 years before it was perfected by the Romans to include nails, Dowd previews its piercing violence. We are about to discover that his prophecies are painfully precise. So that you will be able to more fully appreciate what follows, one of the crucifixion's most telling attributes is that it causes the victim's bodily fluids to drain into their lungs, leaving them parched. While dying of thirst, they drown. Bones are not broken, but both shoulders and other major joints are dislocated. 374 Oxygen depletion occurs because the victim is unable to stretch their diaphragm while hanging by their arms, causing carbon dioxide toxicity in the bloodstream. This results in strength melting away, starting with the heart muscles. We know this today, but not 3,000 years ago, which is when these words were inscribed by Dowd. That makes his depiction extraordinary. His physical mortality was ebbing away. As water, Kahamaim, as it pertains to bodily fluids, I am poured out and weakened, Shafak, I am drained and emptied, Nephil perfect. And, Wah, all of, Shurl, each of, my most substantial bones, Etsameni, my limbs, are stretched, separated, and out of joint, Parad, have parted and are dispersed. Hitpale perfect, clearly states that at this moment he is not being assisted by anyone, and is enduring this on his own initiative. My heart is now, Labeni higher, my heart has come to be, Kal perfect, like wax, Kaha downag. It has melted, wasting away along with, Massas bar talk any, it is dissolving, weakened and discouraged, within, Nephil perfect, my internal organs, me any, the core of my body. Mizmowr 22:14. Like sunbaked dust, Kaha cheras, similar to a broken vessel of earthenware, my vigor and strength, Kocheni, my vitality and potential, my physical muscular power, are withered and failed, Yabish, are dried up without moisture and incapacitated such that they no longer respond, Kal perfect. And, Wah, my tongue, lashon any, cleaves, tabak, clings and is made to stick, hoffel passive, to the roof of my mouth, malkoch any, to my palate. So, upon, wala, drawing near and approaching, the dust, afa, of the natural earthen material and ready to 375 be pulverized, from 4 QPS, of death, morth, of the plague, they have placed me, validating why I'm here, Shaphath, they have put me here to ratify my purpose, 4 QPS they placed versus you laid in Mount, Kalim perfect. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:15. The textual base of Cheraz, potsherd it is identical to sharash, meaning to be silent while others plot evil, devising a plan of action that cuts and separates. All the while, his expendable physical body, comprised of the elements of the earth, was broken, being deprived of the fluids being drained into his lungs, suffocating him. Morth is death personified. It is the disease that plagues us. Fully amplified, morth conveys, the physical trauma of the body dying, the infliction of a disease that causes death, and a judgment in which the penalty is a death sentence. It is derived from, and at the consonant level spelled identically to, moth, those who are executed and dispatched to die. The body Dowd's soul was still clinging to was in the final throes of serving as the Passover Lamb. It would soon die so that we wouldn't suffer the same consequence. Then his soul would be laden with the corruption of his people and taken to Sheol, the place of separation, in our stead. By bearing Israel's rebellion against Yahowah, he exonerated and pardoned his people on UnYeasted Bread. The character of the overtly political and religious hasn't changed much over the years. Addressing the Romans who became Roman Catholics, Dowd declared, "For indeed, KY, the contemptible scum and abased yelpers, Keleb, loud and attacking, unfaithful pagan dogs, evil male prostitutes of a lowly status and violent nature, puppets and traitors, have surrounded me, nakafeni, they have encircled me like a swirling wind." A politicized religious community providing the 376 testimony, Eda, a congregation acting like a gang in a herd serving as witnesses, of the disastrously corrupt, Ra, of those who are wrong, disturbing, evil, and injurious, establishes a destructive annual cycle to denigrate what I'm doing, nakafeni, they go around me, severing me from my source in a destructive fashion. They bore into, karu, they dug into and pierced, 5/6 FPS has karu, a variation of kara, dig, bore, pierce while the mount has carry, like a lion, my hands, yod, and my feet, waragel any. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:16. These canines would be wolves, Roman and Pauline. Over time, their unifying political and corrupt religious testimony would create a new cycle of events from Easter to Christmas. In so doing, they would completely denigrate Dowd's sacrifice. There would be no provision for Chag Matsah on the religious calendar of Christians or Jews. By denying Dowd's great sacrifice, they would preclude their own participation in the covenant while blocking their path to God. The enormity of what he had done was for naught, at least, for the false witnesses. It was replacement theology at its worst. As the Romans struck their blows, pounding nails into Dowd's wrists, which were considered part of the hand in the 1st century, and into his heels, they karu, bore through them with primitive nails constructed of tapered iron rods. While using such crude implements in this excruciating fashion was repulsive, even reprehensible, there remains a far greater crime here than mutilating and murdering the Messiah. If you are a Jew, faithful to the religious traditions of the rabbis, what I'm going to share ought to make you nauseous, even angry. To keep you from knowing that your Messiah, Dowd, served as the Pesach ale, rabbis altered the passage to read, "Like a lion are my hands and feet." 377. This was not a mistake. It was done on purpose. All these many years later, even with the Dead Sea Scroll found at Nahal Heva in 1950 and the Septuagint confirming karu, bore into rather than keri, like a lion, Jewish scholars are still unwilling to acknowledge that Dowd, as a prophet, accurately described what he, as a great hero, endured. They argue in favor of the Masoretic text. Their last vestige of denial comes by way of suggesting that the writing on the 2nd century BC fragment, over 1,000 years older than the Masoretic text, is too faint to read with certainty. However, you can look it up online as I have done and see a picture of it for yourself if you are still wondering who to trust. The word ends in a wa, not a yowd. The hands and feet of the Passover lamb were nailed to an upright pillar on Moriah during the 4,000th observance of the Miqra'ey. But the Romans who did so were not the only criminals seeking to negate Dowd's sacrifice. Rabbis played their role too. Since what I am claiming regarding this prophecy is easily verified and accurate, it means that Dowd wrote that his hands and feet would be pierced 5 centuries before crucifixion was conceived by the Assyrians and 700 years before the piercing style of Roman execution was invented. It also means that the most esteemed rabbis are liars who should not be trusted. The authors of the oral traditions are deceitful men who are willing to alter God's testimony to suit their own personal agendas. The prophet Zechariah had a great deal to say about the role of father and son in this sacrifice. And since it is especially relevant to this passage, let's consider Zechariah 12:10 before we complete the Mizmowr. Yahweh is anticipating this moment. And, for a time, I will pour out, Shafak, I 378 will provide an outpouring and build upon the house, Al-Baith, on behalf of the family and home, of Dowd, the beloved, of the 1076 occurrences of DWD. This was one of the few in a prophetic text scribed to it, adding a Yod representing the hand of Yah, and upon, also on behalf of, those who dwell in, Azab, the inhabitants who establish their abode and remain in, Yahushalem. The source of guidance and teaching on reconciliation, a spirit of compassion and acceptance, Ruach Chen, the spirit of favor and mercy, of a beautiful and beneficial spiritual garment, for those requesting mercy and clemency, Takanyun, of being treated with kindness and affection, with compassion, from Channon, mercy and favorable treatment. Then, they will be able to look, Nabat, they, at this time, will be equipped to observe, focus upon, pay attention to, and regard, think about and then appropriately respond, to me, LNE, accompanied by the one who, Asher, with whom by association, and to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, they had reviled and pierced, Dakar, they had thrust into by driving sharp implements completely through, Cal perfect, and, they will lament, Sapad, they will sob, expressing their genuine sorrow, Cal perfect, over him, Al-Hu, just like, Ka, similar to the way one cries misp, one shrieks and howls, over the most uniquely special child and valued life, Al-Ha-Yakid, for the only son, from Yakad, who reunited and joined together, anguished and infuriated, Marah, grieving furiously, angry and enraged, even frantic, over him, Al-Hu, on his account. Consistent with, Ka, the anguish suffered over, Marah al, the frustration and rage endured over, the firstborn, Ha-Bekawa, the first son born into a family. Zechariah, remember Zechariah 12:10. When read in conjunction with the 22nd Mizmowr, 379 Zechariah 12 becomes one of the most compelling of all prophetic pronouncements. It sings to our hearts, reassures our minds and comforts our souls. At long last, we can appreciate how the elements which comprise the declaration work in harmony to tell the story everyone needs to hear. To begin, the last opportunity for reconciliation is being poured out in this special way, and at this opportune moment on behalf of the household of Dowd. The Messiah represents Israel, individuals who engage and endure with God, Yahuwdym, the beloved of Yah, and the Berith, covenant family, such that the Beit Dowd, household of Dowd is comprised of select individuals representing a fusion of Yisrael, Yahuwdym, and Ha-Berith. God and King are returning to Yahushalem, the source of guidance on reconciliation on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations. As a result of what they have done for the family during the preceding 5 Miqra'ey, invitations to be called out and meet with God, there will be an outpouring of compassion from the Ruach Spirit upon those who have gathered to receive them. It will be the ultimate family reunion. Our Heavenly Father, spiritual Mother, and beloved Son, our Savior, have returned to claim their own. For the first time in 3,480 years, since the children of Israel, when gathered around Mount Korib, said that they did not want to see or hear from Yahweh again, a select few will be prepared and ready for both. As a result of Dowd's devotion, they will look up to see Yahweh accompanied by his son. God will return with the one Israel reviled and Rome pierced. And this is as it should be, since we did not crucify God but, instead, the one most beloved by him. While it occurred 2,000 years also, all of those gathered before Father and his Son this day will be 380 genuinely sorry that their predecessors rejected the Zarawah when they should have celebrated his sacrifice. Their reaction will be bittersweet but initially more weeping than shrieking. It is hard to imagine looking upon Father and Son and realizing how despicable humankind has been by failing to appreciate the Messiah's gift over the centuries. This will be the first opportunity to publicly apologize to him and then express our gratitude. For Jews, they will be conflicted, horribly embarrassed for failing to recognize his sacrifice, and exceedingly joyful knowing that he earned the right to be their king by saving them. This surviving remnant of Israel, and all those comprising the covenant family, will have made the connection between the Son who is given in Yasha'yah 9 and the Lamb who was sacrificed in Yasha'yah 53, between the firstborn of Mizmowr 89 and the Bekawa of Zechariah 12, between the piercing depicted in this prophecy and foretold in Psalm 22. With Yahweh and Dowd returning to Yahushalem, it will be hard to hold back the tears as we witness our King in all of his glory and visualize the God our forefathers ignored. Dowd's initial life among us 3,000 years ago was the most amazing in human history. He was the consummate poet and lyricist, shepherd and king, father of his nation and son of God, and a prolific prophet and heroic defender of his people. He represented the best and worst of Israel, while in his relationship with Yahowah, he became the exemplar of the covenant. But unfortunately, most of what he came to represent was stolen from him to legitimize religions he would have condemned. Dowd's second coming 2,000 years ago was the most magnanimous in the long history of humankind. He volunteered to have his soul sent down from heaven and placed in a rather ordinary body to serve as the Passover 381 lamb to open the doorway for his people to come home. And then he carried the guilt of the covenant family into Sheol, depositing it there so that we might be perfected and live with him and his Father forevermore. He wrote openly and graphically about it and then endured much of it in the sight of his people, and yet, no one credited him with the most heroic and compassionate act in the history of mankind. Worse, his people denied the Miqra'ey were fulfilled while the Goyim attributed his sacrifice to a figment of their imagination, damning Jews in the process. With Zechariah 12, we come full circle. The Bachower, firstborn during his life as the King of Israel, is projected through his second coming as he was pierced for his people's redemption and then onto his third arrival as he returns as King of the universe with his Father who created it. Those who rejected him now embrace him. And those who disavowed his Father are now in his company. Just as there are 340 Yowbel epochs of 2,000 years between our expulsion from the garden to our return to it courtesy of Father and Son, the Messiah, who was anointed on 3 occasions, will have been here 3 times over the past 3,000 years. He showed us the way home by fulfilling the first 3 Miqra'ey, and he will be there to greet us when we arrive. On the day of reconciliations, as the sun sets to a new dawn on October 2nd, in the Yowbel year of 2033, 6,000 year, Father and Son will return to Yerushalayim as a reconciled Yisrael and covenant family look up with tear-filled eyes, finally recognizing what actually occurred on the Passover. They will appreciate what Dowd declared prophetically and then endured. Returning to Golgotha on this day, Pesach in the Yowbel of 33 CE, year 4000 year, we find that Dowd predicted, 382 I can count, sapar, I can record, measure, and make an accounting of, relating to, all, Sheol, my bones, etsemoth, my skeleton and limbs. They, themselves, stare as they look right through me, Nabat Rabbah Eni. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:17, prophetically wrote about, witnessed and endured. The Romans were savages, but their bloodlust was partially moderated by breaking the legs of most crucifixion victims, so that they would be unable to free their diaphragm. Once the capacity to push up against the nails that had been driven through the ankles was curtailed by broken fibulas, it effectively eliminated the ability to draw air into the lungs and breathe. While this sounds cruel, it was actually done to expedite death, shortening the duration of the agony from days to hours. This was especially relevant when the gruesome specter of crucifixion was visible to the religious pilgrims in Jerusalem for Passover, and it's hard to observe the Sabbath when one's view of the sunset is interrupted by the sight of religious and political leaders torturing the Passover Lamb. But such was not the case with Dowd. He had been whipped to the precipice of death prior to being crucified. So, his body would succumb in a timely fashion without any of his bones being broken. It was a special dignity for a rival king. The second portion of this prophetic pronouncement suggests that, even with all he had written about his sacrifice on behalf of his people, they, nonetheless, looked right past him, unable to fathom what was occurring before their eyes, and they have continued to do so for the past 2,000 years. Since words paint pictures, Romans crucified their victims along major roadways. It was more humiliating and served as a deterrent. Golgotha, the place of the skull, is 383 just outside the Damascus Gate and sits directly beneath what was the summit of Mount Moriah during Abraham's day. Portions of the mountain were carved away to enlarge the Temple Mount and bolster the city's walls. The place of the skull is at street level and faces the main road leading north out of town. Today, the site of the crucifixion is the back parking lot for the Jerusalem bus station. The only artifact I have ever treasured is a piece of limestone I gathered from this place. In all likelihood, the blood-stained mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant lies directly beneath, protected in Yirmiyah's grotto. Providing the fodder used to comprise the Christian New Testament, we find Dowd revealing. They divide, chalak, they plunder, assign, and distribute, my garments, bijdeni, my apparel and clothing, among themselves, lahem, and, for, al, my clothing, labush eni, my garments, they cast lots, nafal gorel, they get down on their knees to toss pebbles to claim a portion. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:18. Dowd was pointing out something quite profound. As the Passover Lamb was making it possible for us to live forever as part of Yahweh's family, inheriting all that God has to offer, Romans were playing with pebbles to determine who could steal his dirty, blood-stained clothes. And yet, all Christians could make of this was to use it to prop up their faith by capitalizing upon a meaningless opportunity to claim that their Jesus had fulfilled yet another prophecy, or at least, the Romans had done so. And while it proved nothing other than Christian desperation, there is a serious problem with the gospel attestation. This was written in first person by the most famous of Jews and, most assuredly, not by Jesus. My means mine not his. 384 But alas, if these Romans had been Roman Catholics, they would have scooped his apparel up, designated his robe as a holy relic, and then erected a lavish shrine so that the faithful could worship it while they collected a visitor's fee. The fact that Passover was being fulfilled by the Son of God to provide everlasting life in accordance with the Torah, would be irrelevant to their religion. With Dowd's last words on the upright pole, Yahweh's spirit departed, leaving the soul of the Passover Lamb to bear the guilt of every covenant member. He pleads. But you, Wapa, Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his higher existence and our shalom, reconciliation, you will not be far away for a protracted period of time, lo rachik, you will not continually disassociate yourself from me, kal imperfect Joseph. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:19 in part. This prophetic statement affirms that during Matsah, Yahowah and Dowd would be separated from one another but not for long. This is why rachik was both negated and scribed in the imperfect conjugation. It also provides the set-apart spirit with a descriptive title. Eloth is the feminine plural of Yal, one who assists and helps, empowers and strengthens. My Eloth, my source of strength and help, Eloth any, one who empowers and assists me, she who provides aid, making me effective and influential, feminine plural form of Yal, El, the strength, fortitude, and ability of the ram opening the doorway. It is my desire and your decision, my choice and your will to act quickly, hastening the process, rapidly rushing in with the minimum passage of time. Chaush, you and I want you to be prepared to act as 385 swiftly as possible. Kal imperative second person singular paragogic ecohortative, to assist in my rescue by supporting me, La Ezra Eni. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:19, 22:20 JPS. Just as the Hebrew language was embodied with the unique capability of limiting or extending the action of a verb over time, it was endowed with the ability to express volition in first, second, or third person. And here, as before, we find that minimizing Dowd's tenure in Shaul is his desire and Yahweh's decision. Obviously, Dowd wanted his time away and confined in the lightless realm of Shaul to be limited, and he realized that, since no one had ever been retrieved from hell, he would be reliant on the set-apart spirit whom he was calling his Eloth. She would be working with Dowd to empower the Passover Lamb and help open Pesach's door. Eloth, as a divine title, similar to Elohim, although now feminine and used in conjunction with the set-apart spirit. This proper noun appears this one time in the Nabi. Eloth, as the feminine form of El, represents the power behind the Passover Lamb, depicting how he would prevail. The name reveals that our spiritual mother is Yal, devoted to providing us with the ability to do whatever is required, empowering us such that we benefit from the Pesach ale and find our way home to Yah. On this day, she would abandon the dying body and then escort the surviving soul from Pesach to Matsah, from Yerushalayim to Shaul. In this way, Dowd's Nepesh would fulfill UnYeasted Bread, taking our collective guilt along with him. Once there, she would observe from the outside for the ensuing 24 hours of Matsah, remaining vigilant and prepared to facilitate Dowd's release. Thereupon, she would envelop Dowd's Nepesh and 386 empower him, preparing him for his return in conjunction with Firstborn Children. Yahowah has consistently called his spirit the Ruach Qodesh, which means set-apart spirit. Presented as a feminine noun, Ruach reveals that Yah's spirit represents God's maternal nature, and by being Qodesh, we know that our spiritual mother is set apart from Yahowah to serve us in similar ways. That is to say that she comes from Yah, that she is part of Yah, and that she is set apart from Yah for our benefit. Knowing this, Dowd is confirming his rendezvous with the set-apart spirit, affirming that the Eloth will be there to liberate his soul from the black hole of Shaul when the job is done. It is my desire and your will, my choice and yours, to deliver my soul, to snatch away and save my soul. Natsal Nepesh Eni, you want as do I for you to do what is required to rescue and liberate my consciousness. Hyphal imperative second person singular paragogic ecohortative, from the horror, heat, desolation, and ruin, min korib, my unique position as son and precious life as the firstborn child, Yakid Eni, from the influence, min yod, from the hand and actions, of the contemptible scum and abased yelpers. Keleb, loud and attacking, unfaithful dogs and evil male prostitutes of a lowly status and violent nature, puppets and traitors. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:20. From this, It's hard to envision why the King James Version published, "Deliver my soul from the sword, my darling from the power of the dog." They came up with "my darling" by including Yachid, only child, which was scribed after Caleb, evil yelpers, rather than making it part of the next statement. The New American Standard Bible, which claims to be literal, reads, "Deliver my soul from the sword, my only 387 life from the power of the dog." The New Living Translation decided to ignore nepesh, soul, the most important word in this statement. "Save me from the sword, my precious life from these dogs." The JPS states, "Deliver my soul from the sword, mine only one from the power of the dog." Souls cannot be pierced, and one would not naturally attribute power to a canine. Correctly rendered, the passage is prophetically and historically accurate, informative and important. The set-apart spirit was tasked with the responsibility of retrieving Dowd's soul from the desolate lifelessness of Shaul, rescuing him from its horrible heat as well, something that is part and parcel of the event horizon of a black hole. Therefore, long before we were introduced to the concept, we find some of the attributes of a black hole depicted in this text. It is a horrible and ruinous place of complete destruction subject to intense heat. This experience is further detailed in Mizmowr, Psalm 88. Collectively, this is the who, when, how, and why behind the fulfillment of the first three Miqra'ey. Yahowah, Dowd, and the set-apart spirit were in one accord, all committed to establishing the covenant family. And they knew he would not be incarcerated any longer than was necessary. "You want to liberate and save me, to rescue and deliver me, Yasha'yah, it is your will to release me, sparing and redeeming me." Hyphal imperative second person masculine singular, out of, min, the mouth, pei, of the fearsome and destructive beast, ia, of the fierce predator, the vicious one who hunts and savages his prey, plucking them away. And from, wa min, the horns of the bull representing the flashing light that has risen on high 388 Kiran Ram, the horned one seeking the highest status in elevated places wanting to be lifted up and trumpeted as a supernatural source of light. "You have answered me during my affliction, Ana Eni, you have responded to me as I'm being harassed, Cal Perfect." Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:21, 22:22 in the JPS Tanakh. This is our second encounter with this fearsome beast, but this time, we learn even more about him. He is comprised of light, and yet is horned and flashy. He seeks a degree of adulation only the highest status would bring. And he is often presented in the guise of a bull. This would make the destructive beast none other than Satan. Taking this one step further, while Arieh is often translated as lion, it is clearly symbolic in this refrain. This vicious predator maims its prey. Also telling, Arieh forms the basis of Aridatha, a name of Babylonian origin which identifies the founder of the Babylonian mystery religion. We should not be surprised then that the most common symbol for Babylon's god was a winged lion. The gates of Babylon were adorned with them. Dowd uses Arieh in the 7th Mizmowr as a pseudonym for Satan's alliance with Shaul, an especially fearsome beast. He wrote, "Yahowah, my God, in you, I find a trusted and safe place, with you delivering me from all my pretentious pursuers, especially the boisterous who are verbally contentious against me. You are preserving me for a later time." Mizmowr 7-1, or otherwise, in the manner of a fiercely destructive being, a vicious beast in search of prey, area, he, to satiate his own cravings, will rip apart my soul, snatching it away and shredding it without sparing it. Mizmowr 7-2, the symbolic definition works well in both citations. To ward off this beast, we can rely on Yahowah's 389 Anna, testimony. His response provides the answer. Since many Hebrew words have a light and dark shading, let's consider an entirely different approach to the concluding statement of Mizmowr, Psalm 22:21. "And so, from, wa min, the brilliant light of this summit which lifts on high, Kiran Ram, the supernatural source of light in this elevated place, you have answered me during my affliction, Ana Eni, you have responded to me during my distress, Cal Perfect." Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:21-22. I prefer this rendering because it not only addresses the location where this occurred, and speaks of the Spirit's response, it serves to connect this portion of the prophecy with what occurred on Moriah 2,000 years earlier. Kiran was used to depict the radiant nature of the Lamb Yahowah promised to provide at this time. No matter how they are rendered, the last four words of the 21st lyric are the most important and the least understood, Min, Kiran, Ram and Anna. Nonetheless, the JPS Tanakh, based upon the Masoretic text, conveys, "From the horns of wild oxen rescues me," changing answers to rescues because otherwise the verse would turn God into an oxen's horn. The Nes gets Anna correct but then commits a similar crime, rendering the passage, "From the horns of the wild oxen you answer me." The ASV adds a yea, but otherwise reads like its descendant. The NIV dropped the reference to answering, Anna, and replaced it with save, Yasha'yah, save me from the horns of the wild oxen. More creative still, the KJV, ignoring 2 of the 4 words and convoluting the others, translates, for thou hast heard me from the horns of the unicorns. That must be proof for the faithful that unicorns really do exist. So that we don't add to the stench, let's start over. 390 Anna can convey something positive or negative depending upon the context. It is typically rendered as to answer, to respond, to testify, or to reply, providing testimony as a witness. At the other extreme, if addressing what Dowd would endure on this day, Anna can be seen as affliction or humiliation. Anna, however, does not mean save or rescue. But what it does mean is important. God responds to those who seek him and are willing to rely upon him. Also, since Anna Eni was scribed in second person, it reads, you answered me. Kieran, as we have learned, has a wide range of definitions. It speaks of shining, being radiant, emitting and sending out brilliant rays of light supernaturally. Kieran's horn symbolism can denote a desire for power and authority over a kingdom. And at times, it can mean flashy. As noted previously, Yahowah uses Kieran in the same place and during the same phase of Abraham's dress rehearsal for Dowd's Passover sacrifice. Speaking of the sacrificial lamb that was substituted by Yahowah, God said he had shining horns of radiant light, Kieran, brilliant flashing rays of light similar to lightning from a supernatural source, symbolic of power, status, and might, a trumpet for signaling a message, and was the summit of a mountain. In the 22nd Psalm, we are on that same mountain with that same lamb observing the same Miqra'ey, separated as they are by exactly 40 Yowbel, years of Yah's lamb. The scholars, who miss the meaning of the passage, find their oxen and unicorns in the Masorete's vowel pointing, not in the text itself. Strong's Concordance, based upon the King James, says, Ram is from Ram, and translates as unicorn 9 times and is probably the great aurochs or wild bulls which are now extinct. The 391 exact meaning is not known. Strong's goes on to report, Ram means lifted up and to rise, but they do not bother to explain what rising up has to do with wild bulls, or unicorns for that matter. And that is probably because those who align themselves with the spirit represented by the wild bull go the opposite direction. Here is another illustrative example. The King James Version renders Bamidbar, Numbers 23:22 as, God brought them out of Egypt, he hath as it were the strength of a unicorn. But that's not what Moses wrote. The Torah doesn't demean its inspiration. Only men do that. The text actually reads, God delivered them out of the crucibles of Miqra'ey with the power, Topa, the ability through choice to deliver and, to raise them up to a higher place and status, Ram. Inaccurate diacritical markings can render God as foolish as a mythical unicorn or, in the case of the Nazb, can put him in league with Satan. God brings them out of Egypt, he is for them like the horns of the wild ox. If nothing else, by exposing these comparisons, we find a reason to stop trusting men, especially the religious. An unfathomable amount of manure has been piled on top of Yahowah's word. The truth is still there, as magnificent as ever, but sometimes we have to hold our noses while digging past man's garbage to find it. We were not with Abraham on Mount Moriah when God foretold of Dowd's sacrifice. We were not with Moses on Mount Horeb when Yahowah recounted this story to him for our edification. We were not with Dowd when he composed this song about what he would endure. And we were not standing outside the Damascus gate witnessing what our Messiah was doing for us on Passover as he fulfilled these words. But we have something equally revealing and reliable, the words our Savior wrote, and 392 they are more than enough. I have chosen to continually recount, providing a written record, Sapar, I want to always proclaim, especially in writing, Peel imperfect cohortative, of your name, Shem Otter, your personal and proper designation, reputation, renown, to my brethren, La Hni, to my relatives, kin, countrymen, and family, within the midst of, Bar Talk, the summoned community who have been called out, Kahal, the assembled who have gathered for this purpose, so as to radiate your brilliant source of enlightenment and brag about you, Halal Otter, to become radiant and ongoing with you while extolling your merit, Peel imperfect. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:22. Israel's most acclaimed shepherd and king, Yahowah's Messiah and Son, recorded, related, recounted, declared, and proclaimed God's Shem, his personal and proper name. Too bad his brethren fail to follow his example. He wrote what they have made a religion out of denying. It is religion-shattering to note that Dowd never departs from his first-person account of Pesach and Matsah. He does not speak of another individual or ever address a third person. You will never find the name Jesus Christ on his lips or scribed from the point of his pen. It simply does not exist. Since Yahowah inspired every one of his Nabi, prophets, since they are all keen on conveying Dowd's name and none mention someone named Jesus, this means that either no one by that name contributed to his people or he had no interest in us knowing or using this name. And that makes the misnomer, Jesus Christ, completely irrelevant from God's perspective. He would be no more God than Julius Caesar. Curiosity prompts us to consider why this would be so. 393 Especially since the world is preoccupied with a name Yahweh never mentions. A third of the planet's occupants are celebrating Easter as I write these words, and they categorize themselves as Christians, when, even though the Babylonian holiday is condemned and there was no Christ. Moreover, Jesus' alleged resurrection makes the misnomer more like Dionysus or Osiris than anyone spoken of by God. Dowd volunteered to endure the sacrifice because he loved Yahweh and his people. Respect and revere, appreciate the astonishing awesomeness of Yahweh, the proper pronunciation of the name of Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our Shalom, restoration, to radiate his light, halal hue, make his brilliant source of illumination clearly visible. Every Shirl, descendant, Zerah, seed, child, offspring, family, and progeny, of Jacob, father of Israel who was renamed Israel, you should choose to consider him worthy of respect and massively significant, kabad hu, elect to hold him in high regard, valuing him immensely, peel imperative. You should want to live with him, wagrumin hu, you should choose to become a welcomed guest in his company, sojourning to the place where you dwell and remain as a result of your reverence and respect for him, kal imperative, all you descendants of Israel, min shirl zerah Yisrael, including every child who engages and endures with God. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:23. Dowd did so when he wrote these songs, then when he lived with his Father in heaven, and now when demonstrating that he had fulfilled Miqra'ey at the conclusion of Pesach and Matsah. 394 Dowd knows a great deal about respect, how it is earned and lost, and why it is so important. Much of the motivation for saving Israel by fulfilling Pesach and Matsah was to earn back the respect of his people so that he could lead them through eternity. Dowd had been a shepherd, and he knew the importance of earning the trust of his flock. He had tangled with lions and bears, risking his life to protect them. As a shepherd king, the Messiah was devoted to protecting his people and defending their home. He had earned their admiration when he slew the foremost warrior of the day. But he would squander much of what he had earned by the way he responded to Shaul and Absalom. Over his life, he earned it back and then gave it away. As Israel's greatest defender, the Zarahua, protective ram and sacrificial lamb knew that he would be able to endure whatever the Romans, the Goliath of their day, brought to bear against him. This time, he would use the body his soul had occupied as the stone. The ruach would be the sling. In so doing, he would earn his people's respect such that he would lead them as a shepherd, knowing that they would rely upon him. One more battle, just 2 days of conflict, would pay dividends forever. His plan was as brilliant as it was heroic. However, knowing the full extent of the excruciating torture 1,000 years in advance, while recognizing that it would be another 2,000 years beyond that until anyone credited him for making these sacrifices for his people, to remain willing to carry out this commitment requires a level of courage and character exemplified in a single, solitary soul. So, now you know why Yahweh chose him. Dowd was not just willing, he wanted to do it. He sang about it. One stone was all he would need to fell the giant threatening Israel. Although, when his people denied 395 Pesach's fulfillment, and his foes turned the lamb into a god, it had to sting worse than the whips. As before, defending Israel by defeating those seeking to subjugate his people would be easier than subduing the more intrusive foe devouring the nation at its core, religion. To resolve it, Dowd's soul would accept our guilt, carry it with him into hell, and endure the Miqra'ey of Matsah in Shaul. After redeeming his people, Yahweh liberated Dowd's Nepesh, saving him in an act that further enhanced this son's respect for his father, which is why he is singing about it here. It would be a beautiful picture, with Dowd now bathed in his father's light. He would be the firstborn of Miqra'ey as a result of what he and his father had accomplished on Passover and UnYeasted Bread. Knowing many would follow, Dowd then encourages us to respect Yahweh as he had done, and then expect the same result. Dowd is describing the gift of the set-apart spirit and her garment of light. She has the ability to empower us and enlighten us, teaching us, while rendering us perfect in Yahweh's eyes by immersing us in her brilliant light. She provides the spiritual rebirth required to be adopted into Yahweh's family. What's particularly revealing in this regard is that halal means to radiate light, not reflect it. For this to occur, we must have the light source within us. When we are born anew from above in the set-apart spirit, she resides within us, becoming the source of our illumination, empowerment, and enlightenment. Halal is almost always translated as praise, but this is not its primary definition, and it misses the point. Halal's preferred connotation: to shine, to radiate bright and brilliant light, to make clear and visible by bringing forth the light, revealing its source. 396 While the secondary meaning of the word can mean extol in the sense of admiring, in addition to boasting, these inferences can lead to the word's dark side. Halal's tertiary connotations include, to make a show, and to be praised for it, to create a grandiose appearance, to be foolish, insolent, and arrogant. Yahweh did not create us to praise him. He is not insecure. Moreover, the idea of worshipping God is perverse. Having us worship him would be like having thoughtless tadpoles croak out that, by comparison to frogs, men are really swell. Creating an inferior being for this purpose would be narcissistic. Sure, it is appropriate to acknowledge his generosity. Like any parent, he would appreciate that as long as it is heartfelt, and straightforward and not self-serving. Since Yahweh's intent is for us to engage in the covenant relationship with him, he does not want us to fear him. While I understand that almost every English Bible translates "yere" as fear, the word also means to respect and revere. We cannot love while afraid. Fear breeds revulsion, not affection. Moving on to the second of three statements, the operative verb, kabad, is the first word of the second of 7 instructions. It is used to describe the nature of the ideal relationship between children and their father and mother. And that is why this is set within the context of Yaakov, the forefather of the children of Israel and thus of the covenant family. Equally important, Dowd is still speaking of Yahweh. The textual consonants which comprise kabad give rise to an important series of derivatives. Collectively, they convey weightiness, massiveness, significance, worth, value, abundance, glory, and greatness. In context, therefore, if we see Yahweh as significant, he promises to view us the same way. If we respect Yahweh's massive 397 energy and power, he will share his with us. Value him and we will inherit his abundance. Acknowledge his greatness and he will bring us into his presence and clothe us in his glory. But, if you trifle with him and see him as insignificant, you will become so insignificant it will be as if you never existed. Disrespect his massiveness, and you will be reduced to nothingness. Therefore, kabad defines the nature of the choice pertaining to a relationship with God and its consequences. Disregarding Yahweh's intent, the JPS Tanakh tells us that we should dread him, with him being the Messiah. The King James Version, in its usual rut, reverts back to fear him. But the word underlying this message is gra, and it speaks primarily of abiding, dwelling, and remaining, residing as welcomed guests who gather together, living in harmony as part of one's sojourn through life. In modern parlance, gra would describe an enduring staycation, which would be ideal for those residing in Jerusalem. The truth was hard to miss because Yisrael, individuals who engage and endure with God, is in many ways analogous with Grin, that the chosen people have been invited to live in Yah's home. The secret to our success is contained in these words. Indeed, KY, he has not relinquished his regard for or thought less of, lo bazar, he has not shown contempt for nor devalued, nor has he lost respect for, refused to consider, nor abstained from, kal perfect, nor has he rejected, while lo shakats, he has not shown antipathy nor disdain toward nor an aversion for, the responsive one who is afflicted and oppressed, in youth any, the one who answers the summons, who engages and acts is humble and unpretentious, who replies even while persecuted, from Anna, to answer. Respond, and 398 engage. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:24. We should all make this choice and look forward to this day. But let's be clear, this opportunity was created for Yisrael. We are invited to join them, not replace them. While he is Yahweh, the one who remains responsive even in the midst of his affliction is Dowd. And even though we will never endure this degree of persecution, it is a message for us, such that we also remain responsive to Yahweh's calling, even in our darkest hour when all appears lost. And in this case, Dowd, after having accepted the guilt of every covenant member over thousands of years, would have been vulnerable to rejection. And yet, nothing would interfere with Yahweh's enduring love for his son. Bazar is the opposite of kabad. The basic meaning is to accord little value to someone. It conveys disdain and a lack of respect or reverence. Bazar can be rendered, to hold in contempt, to refuse or abstain from, or to treat as beneath one's notice or dignity. Dowd is, therefore, summarizing Yahweh's policy, bazar for bazar, kabad for kabad. If you don't respect him and value his redemptive solution, you aren't going to trust him or rely on it. And since there is but one God, one source of life, and one Savior, by being bazar, by being of little worth, by being beneath one's notice, and by being alone and abandoned, bazar happens. The most interesting aspect of this statement might be the realization that both in youth and any are based upon Anna, a word whose primary meaning is to respond by answering a summons to meet. Yahweh's 7 Miqra'ey, 3 of which Dowd is seen responding to in his psalm, are invitations to be called out and welcomed into God's presence. Our response to them determines our future, if we even have one. 399. This is intriguing because Dowd is conveying both sides of Anna, to answer and respond or be afflicted and persecuted. Said another way, Dowd's Nepesh, soul was afflicted on Pesach and Matsah so that those who reply and answer Yahweh's invitations don't suffer the same fate. Having begun the 22nd Mizmowr at a defining moment in the second of 3 epochs of Dowd's prolonged existence, asking my God, why? And then detailing his ordeal through Pesach and Matsah, Dowd has turned his attention to Yahweh. He realized that his father will always be the impetus behind the restorative effects of these Miqra'ey, orchestrating every aspect for our benefit. Dowd wants to share the result with us. His soul and Yahweh's spirit were reunited. Nor did he continually conceal his presence, while lo sat Panahu, nor has he hidden his appearance, from him, Minhu. And, Wah, during, Ba, his request for help, Shoahu, his pleading for relief and request for assistance in a desperate situation, to him, Elhu, to he who is God, he listened, Shama, he heard. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:24. If you recall, it was this very same cry for help that initiated the Yatzer, exodus from Miraim. Yahweh listened then, just as he will listen again during the time of Jacob's troubles. We are witnessing the culmination of God's promises to his people. As we have long recognized, there will be a second Yatzer, exodus, this one from the Miraim of modern man. God is waiting for us with open arms. All we have to do is respond. Dowd's lyrics reveal that Yahweh was aware of what would be occurring to his son's soul, and it is evident that 400 they had discussed how this would all transpire. This perspective offers yet another affirmation that father and son had developed mutual adoration. They were eager to praise one another, both proud and impressed with what the other had accomplished. In so doing, they reveal what fulfilling Chag Matsah accomplished, while helping us better appreciate why Yahweh prefers to work through special people like Dowd rather than alone. Even God couldn't achieve this moment independently. And from Dowd's view, the son is singing his father's praises because he was grateful for what he was accomplishing on behalf of Israel. From you and because of you, Minethota, I will be appreciated and adored for shining brightly, my reputation exalted, Tehillah Eni, my song proclaiming my accomplishment and gratitude for this tremendous opportunity will elicit praise, feminine from Halal, brightly shining and radiating light, construct, making it possessive, within the greatly esteemed assembly, Barkahal Rab, among the abundant and exalted company, fulfilling my commitment and promise to be part of the free will offering, Nida Eni, my vow. I am fulfilling restitution and complete restoration, Shalem, I am offering for enduring recompense and renewal, Peel imperfect first person singular, in a conspicuous and straightforward fashion in the presence, nedged, openly and in full view, of those who respect and admire it, Yehu. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:25. This is the Messiah's statement of purpose. It explains why he chose to endure the worst man and devil could inflict. His people and his father were worth the sacrifice. Dowd has earned the respect and adoration of God and every covenant member. And if they had not been so easily indoctrinated, the same would have been true of every 401 Israelite and Yahwud. So, while it was the greatest achievement in his life, it was Yahweh who made this possible. God combined Dowd's brilliant decision and courageous approach with his ability to achieve the plan's purpose. Having convinced God that he should be allowed to honor the most important promise ever made by enduring this excruciating trial during Chag Matsah as the sacrificial victim, Dowd is acknowledging that, while he will be adored for having done so, Yahweh deserves the credit. Without God, Dowd does not exist. Without Dowd, God is still God. But beyond the obvious, had Yahweh been an absentee landlord, disengaging after creating the universe, Dowd would not be worth knowing or remembering. Without Yahweh choosing, anointing, and inspiring him, he remains a shepherd, his great potential squandered in Bethlehem. It goes far deeper. Without Yahweh conceiving, articulating, and enabling the Berith and Miqra'ey in the Torah, and then demonstrating their effectiveness in the lives of his people, Dowd's sacrifice would have been meaningless because it would not benefit anyone. Dowd was motivated by what he knew Yahweh had and would accomplish through Pesach, Matsah, and Bikurim on behalf of the Berith. And he recognized that his father was capable of orchestrating the entire affair to justifiably reconcile his relationship with his people. Yahweh made it possible for Dowd to be great. And Dowd understood the opportunity God had presented, he accepted the conditions and benefited from the result. And now, because of what father and son have accomplished by working together, the same opportunity, conditions, and benefits are available to everyone else. Working together as father and son, they did these 402 things in a conspicuous, straightforward fashion, each on the right day, each in the right way, each in the right order, and did so publicly at the crossroads of the world. The song's lyrics continue with prophetic echoes of what Yahowah would bring. The unpretentious and straightforward who respond, or the sincere who act by answering the call, from Anna, to answer, respond, and reply, shall be continually nourished, Akal, they shall always be fed, Kal imperfect, and genuinely satisfied with overwhelming provisions, Wasaba, and they will be content with what is being provided with all of their needs met, Kal imperfect. Those who seek him, inquiring about and accounting for him, Deroshu, those who search for him while learning from him, Kal participle, will continually radiate Yahowah's brilliant and clear light, Halal Yahowah, they will become a visible source of Yahowah's light, Peel imperfect third-person masculine plural. Your essential persona and good judgment, Libab Otter, your inner nature and individual essence, your thoughts, feelings and decisions, your mind and heart, and thus your soul and consciousness, will live forever based upon this restoring witness, Ad, shall be eternally restored and preserved, revived and nurtured throughout time as a result of this eternal testimony, Kal imperfect Joseph. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:26. And yet, there it was, the whole of it, from Pesach to Bikurim, laid out before him in all of its excruciating and yet exhilarating detail. There were moments when the Son of God must have wanted to close his eyes and turn away, but he could not because he had been sent as a prophet for this purpose. There would be a happy ending, a divine purpose for enduring the suffering. This is the story 403 Yahowah wanted Dowd to share. And then to think, father and son did all of this to save the men who were standing by and allowing the lamb to be abused, the men and women who seemed incapable of responding at the time. It had to have been cathartic for the king. And yet, they would celebrate in the end. Through it all, Dowd had been taken forward in time without moving a step from where he lived, to witness and then report on the fulfillment of Passover, UnYeasted Bread, and Firstborn Children. Then, he mustered the resolve to do as he had promised. All of this took place in a conspicuous and straightforward fashion on the designated day, in the right way, in the correct order, at the crossroads of the world. And while it would take the rest of us a few thousand years to get the drift, Dowd boldly proclaimed what he had witnessed, indeed, experienced. Should you wonder, the Kahal Rab, Great Assembly on behalf of the community's Yom Kippurim, the Day of Reconciliations. It not only designates the day Yahowah will return with his Mashiach and Melech, Dowd, it commemorates the restoration of Yisrael. This is the synthesis of the Torah. It is the answer, the promise, the purpose, the means, and the reward. It encapsulates Dowd's life and lyrics. The final 4 lines of the 3,000-year-old prophetic Mizmowr, Psalm reveal that Yahowah is looking forward to Yisrael's return with Yahuwdym. This is then the ultimate expression of Dowd's purpose and Yahowah's promise. There is nothing more important than reminding Yahuwdym why they ought to return. They will continually remember, Zakar, they will recall and will be mindful, Kal imperfect, and then they will return, Washub, they will turn around and think 404 differently, re-establishing relations, renewed and restored by turning, to, Yahowah, Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his higher existence and our Shalom, reconciliation, everyone to the extremities of the land and earth, Sherlafis Eres, all finally without ceasing to the far extent of the material realm. And, they will settle down and camp out, while making this announcement on their own initiative, sure, they will verbally explain this without being pressured to do so, continually conveying their decision using words, announcing this without outside influence while camping out for a prolonged period, Estafel, reflexive of the hitpail, imperfect, approaching your appearance, La Pana Otter, upon your presence, all people and ethnicities, Shurl Mishpacha Gawim, every member of the extended family and race. Including non-Israelites. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:27. We began the 22nd Mizmowr with Dowd Azab, separated from Yahowah and near death, and now, we find ourselves camping out with him forevermore. We have moved through Pesach, Matsah, and Bikurim, enabling Shabuah and Towrah to facilitate Kippurim, such that we are celebrating Sukkah. In this way, Chor is a full-service verb, addressing everything from settling down and camping out to making our choice to live with Yahowah known. It is reassuring that God's campers are gathered prior to his appearance. Our mission is to ensure that father and son are pleased with the reception they receive. It is also affirming of our experience that every member of the covenant family will be there, including Gawim. Stating the obvious, no one is remembering or acknowledging he whose name is never spoken, Jesus. 405 Peter's and Paul's imaginary friend didn't accomplish any of this, and he isn't coming back because he was never here in the first place. He is not even a good counterfeit of Dowd. The reason that this and every other prophecy regarding the fulfillment of the Miqra'ey do not mention someone named Yasha'yah, much less Jesus, is that the former is irrelevant apart from what it represents, and the latter is a misnomer. I was curious as to the set of circumstances whereby everyone on earth would be making this announcement before Yahweh. But there are 5 answers provided in the text. First, those included in this group have already proclaimed the truth about Yah. They, therefore, would be covenant. Second, each has changed their thinking and returned to Yah, as is required by the covenant. Third, they have made this announcement on their own initiative, and that means that they made this declaration after having left the influence of religion and politics. Fourth, mishpacha, is a compound of to question and shifka, to spread out as a family. It portends that these are the few among the many. And fifth, like the first, these announcements are being made concurrent with Yahweh's arrival. At this moment, the only surviving souls will be covenant. Dowd will have silenced and obliterated the rest. Because indeed, for the express reason, on behalf of during the approach of Yahweh, the proper pronunciation of the name of Eloah, God has directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our Shalom, restoration, the king reigns, Maluka, there is rulership and royalty, from Malak, to become king and reign by 406, providing advice and counsel, providing leadership by painting pictures with words, while martial, taking charge through effective communication, making informative and revealing comparisons with proverbs and parables, governing through wise discourse, Kal participle, with people from different races and places, Gawim, different ethnicities. Mizmowr, song, Psalm 22:28. The opening lines of this song were focused on Dowd's fulfillment of Pesach. As we near its conclusion, we are celebrating Sukkah. But more than this, Yahweh has answered a question that, until this moment, I've never understood: why would anyone living in Yahweh's presence need a king? The answer is found in Marshall, because Dowd will lead through effective communication and govern through wise discourse, ever ready to paint pictures with his words which lead to understanding. No one has been as gifted in this regard as the author of these lyrics, and that is why he reigns as king on behalf of Yahweh. Rather than return to the Shafot, judges, in the covenant family, the firstborn and most beloved son will provide proverbs and parables. This is Dowd's moment to shine. And those of us who answer his call will bask in his light. Further, as should be obvious now that we have witnessed father and son fulfilling the Miqra'ey together, that God prefers to work with us rather than alone. Yahweh's preferences will not change as we enter eternity. With Dowd singing every evening, the children of the covenant will gather around the campfire and be regaled by his stories. Listen. All of Shirl, the anointed, Dashan, the chosen harvest, the accepted and satisfied, the empowered and content, the prosperous and enriched, the vigorous who are now thriving, of the land and earth, Eres of the material realm, who approach his presence, Lapana 407 Hugh, at his appearance, shall be nourished, Akal, they will have been fed, Kal perfect, and they will settle down living in shelters while independently making their position known, Yasha'yah, they shall tabernacle, reminiscent of Sukkah. Shelters where we camp out with God, while they make public pronouncements and explain, using words, what matters most to the living, Estafel, Hitpale imperfect. Mizmowr, song, Psalm 22:29, JPS 22:30, in part. This is yet another affirmation that we should be following Dowd's example. He is showing us the way home. Just as he was anointed 3 times, symbolic of his 3 lives here on earth, Yahweh will be anointing every member of his covenant family. And as a result, we will all be Dashan, among the chosen for the harvest, accepted and satisfied, richly empowered and totally content. Over these last few stanzas of this glorious song, Dowd has stated that his father's provisions satisfy, that those who rely upon his bread will be nourished, and that they will be healthy and prosperous, lacking nothing. He has also said that those who change their thinking and attitude toward him will be restored. The children of the covenant are now Yasha'yah, living in Sukkah, shelters, camping out with our Heavenly Father during the millennial celebration of the Sabbath. The Miqra'ey of Sukkah, the invitation to be called out and meet with God, is a time of wondrous pronouncements as we proclaim what it means to us individually to have been afforded this opportunity. These insights are provided by Torah, which most English Bibles wrongly render as bowing down, and prostrating oneself in worship. Even outside of the context of Yahweh's return, and living in his presence, there is very little etymological support for that rendering. At best, it is listed 5th among 4 considerably more valid 408 definitions in most Hebrew dictionaries. And some lexicons don't even include bowing or worshipping among Torah's connotations. As we have discussed, the primary meaning of Torah is to tell, to explain, to announce something publicly, to verbally convey an important statement using words, and to inform making a declaration. The secondary definition for chore speaks of settling down and living in shelters while making our positions known as we celebrate tabernacles. In this context, chore is a settlement, a place people camp out, and an encampment where they tabernacle together. This idea of living collectively is further reinforced by chore, the name God gave to Adam's companion. It reveals that she spoke her mind while camping out in the garden. And while her proclamations got herself and Adam expelled from Eden, coming full circle, it is ours which will allow us back in. That is not to say that people won't bow down before God. Many will. And this realization brings us to the second half of the 29th statement. For the earth to become like Eden, it will have to be cleansed. As part of this process, we read, those who are habitually kneeling down, prostrating themselves, having made life miserable, kara, those who are continually bowing down on their knees, imperfect third person masculine plural, will all descend, going down, surely arad, those bowing down will all be abandoned and lowered, brought down, participle, to the dust of the earth, afa, to the ground, toward the powdery ash and dirt, to the rubbish and rubble of the material realm, even, the soul itself, nipeshu, his consciousness. He will not be allowed to live, locheya, he will not be kept alive, restored to life, revived from death, nor 409 spared, saved, or preserved, peel perfect third person masculine singular. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:29. As we have shared throughout Yada Yahowah, there are three different fates awaiting human souls. Those who have embraced the terms and conditions of Yahweh's covenant will camp out with God, learning from him and sharing with him. Those souls who ignore his covenant, even reject his covenant, will cease to exist. They will not be kept alive nor be restored to life. For them, it is dust to dust and ashes to ashes. There will be neither reward nor penalty. Suffering a debilitating fate, those souls who have led others astray, those who have advanced the cause of religion and politics, who have sought to replace Yahweh's covenant and people, will descend to Sheol to experience an eternity of emotional anguish separated from God. The verdict in the latter two cases will be determined during the millennial Sabbath of shelters. Every soul estranged from Yahweh will be judged, bowing down before God to receive their disposition. If you are a Haredi Jew, Muslim, Catholic, or Orthodox Christian and lower yourself, habitually bowing down, prostrating yourself in religious worship, a day will come when you will kneel before God, and on that day, such souls will be extinguished. This realization is further proof that souls are mortal. Immortality requires being born anew in Yahweh's spirit or aligning oneself with Satan's spirit, and leading others astray. Dowd, speaking of his God and Savior, concludes his song by singing that we will be like the Messiah in two additional ways, both working with Yah and proclaiming his message. Posterity, Zerah, the seed which is sown, the descendants, children, and offspring, shall work with him, Abyb, will act, serve, and labor with him, 410 expending considerable energy and intensity to do things with him, imperfect. This will be recounted, recorded, and proclaimed, Sapah, it will be regarded and told, conveying the full and accurate measure of the scroll in writing, imperfect, of the approach, La, of the drawing near, of my upright one, down any, the upright pillar of my tabernacle, 2, La, on behalf of, the generations and their dwelling places, Hadawa, those related by birth, the family line, the household and home. Mizmowr 22:30. They will come, they will arrive, always be included, and continually approach, imperfect, while, conspicuously announcing, exposing and declaring, nagad, explaining and manifesting, informing and reporting, publicly announcing and expounding upon, imperfect, he was right, vindicating, and acquitting, Zadakahu, he is correct, fair, and honest, a righteous and truthful Savior, doing so on behalf of the family members, with regard to and when approaching the people who are related, who have been and will be born, Yolod, who are their descendants and children, such that they honestly acknowledge, surely and truly, he has engaged and acted to actually accomplish this, Asar, he has done this job, genuinely performing this work at this moment in time, perfect. Mizmowr, Song, Psalm 22:31. This is a reminder of what Yahweh said to Adam, what he demonstrated with Noach, and what he told the children of Israel prior to the Exodus. God wants us to work with him. In the here and now, our single most important job is to share Yahweh's Torah, teaching with our children. The more they know about his covenant, the more likely it is that they will embrace it. And that is the principal message of this song's conclusion. 411 Tzedakah is most often translated as righteousness, a term I don't typically favor because so many instinctively attach a religious connotation to it. They assume that to be righteous is to be good. But Dowd, the author of this song, was called Tzedakah even though he was, at times, bad. To be Tzedakah is to be right, but not in the sense of being perfect unless that is understood to mean possessing a truthful understanding of the word. To be correct is to comprehend what Yahowah, his Torah, and his covenant mean to our lives. God has repeatedly used Zardak and Zardaka throughout every prophetic passage, focusing on his fulfillment of the first four Miqra'ey. And so that we might more fully appreciate what it means to be made right with God, let's examine the English words vindication and justification more closely. Webster defines vindication as to set free, delivering the accused from all allegations and blame, to provide a defense which protects by way of justification. Under its synonyms, Webster lists deliver, confirm, substantiate, justify, defend, exculpate, and maintain. Justification is defined as the process of proving that someone is right, especially in the sense of being absolved and therefore worthy of salvation. To be absolved is to be released from an obligation including the consequence of sin. Unlike righteousness, which is a religious term, vindication and justification are legal concepts that focus on the process of exculpation. Yahowah's plan is very specific. I do not know how anyone can read this portrayal of Dowd's sacrifice and not be moved to conviction. Prophecy does not get any more relevant than this. No words sing more beautifully or more clearly. Dowd explained his role in the single greatest act in human history, the vindication of his people and the covenant family. He committed it to writing 1,000 years 412 before it occurred, so that, when it happened, we would know that he had bestowed this gift. He did so because he loves us and wants us to be part of his Father's family.